Thank you so much for having me here today. My name is Dr. Riva Robinson. You can call me just Riva. The MD is something I've done. It's not necessarily something that I'm necessarily like so attached to. And you'll hear a little bit more about that journey and how I've been a little bit of a rogue doctor all along the way. But I've been competing in bodybuilding for about 7 years now, and that's really been my passion. So it's been a way for me to infuse all parts of myself into this experience from the functional medicine background, where I'm doing everything to optimize well being, which is one way that I've kind of, I wouldn't necessarily set myself aside, but I would say set a different path for others to follow that may be experiencing issues with their health, but still want to show up in a sport that demands a lot from our bodies. So there's a bit of that functional medicine part of me that I bring to the world, of bodybuilding, and also just my passion for having fun. I mean, at the end of the day, the sport is supposed to be fun. And I think a lot of us do have that in mind, but I think sometimes it's easy to get just kind of sidetracked and caught up in the hustle of it all. And so that's where, I just really enjoy every step of this process and just, bringing fun to the front and center of my lifestyle. And let's see what else about me. Currently, in my line of work, I've been shifting more towards working with the bodybuilding community, which obviously makes sense given my experience in the sport, and really just helping people create a more sustainable way of competing where, we can be fully invested in the sport, but also fully invested in our health and well-being too.
What led to all of that stuff when it comes to the bodybuilding and the health interest and, functional medicine? Like, where did what led to that, I guess? Was there like an athletic background or what was it? Are you a personal trainer, online fitness coach, or gym owner on the verge of burnout? Are you wanting to grow your fitness business but can't add more hours to your hectic schedule? Introducing Trainer Revenue Multiplier, the premier wealth creation system for fitness professionals that helps you earn more and work less. Visit www.trainerrevenuemultiplier.com today to schedule your free business accelerator session. If you're serious about taking your business to the next level, schedule your call today.
Yeah, yeah. So I started doing gymnastics when I was 4 years old. And so I found it funny, and it didn't even occur to me maybe until, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years into competing. It's my dream as a gymnast. We all want to go to the Olympics, right? Like that's, my idols were Dominique Dawes and, the other, woman of the epic 1996 Olympics where it's like I saw myself in all of them. So I was like, one day I'm going to be an Olympian. That was a dream. And so, I think a lot of us who have gymnastics backgrounds end up getting burnt out because the sport, you have to decide, like, am I going to dedicate my entire life to this? And at the age of 12, here I am working out 3 to 4 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. Actually, just six, not seven. We had Sundays off, but 3 hours a day where you wake up, you go to school, you eat a snack, you go to practice, you get home at 9 p.m., and then you finish your homework, go to sleep, and you start it all over again. And so I had a very, extremely regimented childhood with gymnastics being at the center of that. And then it reached a point where it wasn't fun anymore. And it was such a hard transition for me. Is I mean, there were a lot of things that converged at that point in time where I took a little hiatus from gymnastics. So I was 12 years old and on that fast track where that's around the age where you have to decide, am I going to be that one who literally starts homeschooling and then goes to the, super elite gym 2 or 3 hours away and basically lives out of the gymnastics bag, and there are people who end up just going way, way, way down the rabbit hole with that. And I got a little taste of that where, we were working out at Olympic gyms on the weekend and going to special camps during the summer. And it was all exciting. But then would joke around. We're like, why are we like working a full-time job and we're like 10 years old? This is kind of crazy. It's like, oh yeah, birthday parties on the weekend. Sorry, no, I have a meet or I have, this training camp or this or that. And it reached a point where it's like I knew I wanted a different life, but I had dedicated my life to that point, all 10 years of it. Yeah, or I started when I was around 3. So most of my life, walking life in the sport. And it was so much of my identity. And so when it reached the point where I was like, okay, do I quit? I know that's what feels right, but who am I if I'm not Riva the gymnast? I won't be special. I won't be that kid who is, known for doing all the flips and doing all these things. I won't be me if I'm not a gymnast. And it was pretty soul crushing at the time because, I didn't really come from a home and I'm, was blessed to have great parents, but I didn't really have a good sense of I will be loved no matter what I do. It felt like love was performative. Like, you do great things and you get your parents' attention when you do outstanding things. And so I have to constantly be performing or else I won't be receiving love and praise. And so the pivotal moment for me was when my grandmother passed away the summer when I was 12 years old. And she was really, and I didn't recognize it at the time. It was probably maybe just like 10, 15 years ago. I realized that I really identified with her as my spiritual mother. My parents were medical doctors and had a busy practice. It was my grandma who really stood in that role of mother for me. So when I lost her at 12 years old and was already in that existential crisis of who am I if I'm not a gymnast, it made it a little bit easier to let the sport go because I was depressed and just didn't want to do anything at all. And so that was the moment where I really got to decide, okay, well, who do I want to be if I'm not in this sport that consumes all of what I do and who I am? And that's kind of set me on the path. I'm still unpeeling all the layers of me and figuring out what is that. I don't think I'll ever have that one thing that defines me, as I'm just so like I want to do all the things. And so, I was blessed to have that amazing athletic foundation. Is once you're a gymnast, you can pretty much go into any sport that you want to. So I went into track and field and excelled there. I did long and triple jump and 100, 200, 4 by 100, 4 by 200, and did great. Loved it until I got horrible semblance and was like, okay, well, what do I want to do next? And so I started lifting weights. And then that's when I got addicted to that feeling of feeling just truly empowered to take my body to whatever level that I wanted to. As you probably are familiar, gymnasts have a lot of body issues. And, thankfully I didn't have the coaches or the type of team where they weighed us and, made like restricted our food, but it was still very much a part of the culture. It's like you need to look thin. Like they score the thinner girls better oftentimes. Like I remember having girls on our team who were thicker who did amazing work but still wouldn't score as high, and it just saddened me. That was like, okay, well, if I ever gain weight then I'm not going to be doing as well. And so you get those stories cycling. um but yeah, like I just was going back to the idea of the Olympic dream. That really that seed started to root even more once I got into competing and seeing that, like, in life, we're going to have dreams and they might be front and center for a certain part of our life, and we might have to put them on pause. But that doesn't mean that we don't get to come back around to them. And even now, I'm in a phase where I'm like, yeah, I may compete again soon. I may not. I'm okay with that. Like, I'm just focusing on life and being a little bit more grounded and all of the things that I get to do and not feeling so focused just on one thing. And yeah, it feels great knowing that the stage will be there. Someday I will still be an Olympian. And then when it does unfold, the timing will be perfect.
Going to like the mindset you were saying of like kind of losing your identity because of, being a gymnast, and that's what you saw yourself as. That's what you probably thought, think that everybody sees you as. So how long do you feel like it took to kind of like break out of the cycle of seeing yourself as this one thing and turning more into like, just let me see what I enjoy. And then like if I don't enjoy that, it's okay. Or if I'm not good at that, that's okay. Like, was that kind of a struggle as well to just be okay with not being good at something for a while?
Absolutely. And to be honest, it's something I still face today. Like, I find myself sometimes avoiding things that I know I won't be great at first. And like when that trigger pops up, I'm like, oh, okay. Like, that's okay. We can try something new and fail at it. Like, you're still going to be an amazing person. You are still loved. Like, I have a lot of conversations with my inner child these days because there were a lot of deep wounds that, we all have carried deep wounds from our childhood that we might not even recognize are playing out. So, these days, I think, what has allowed me to have a little bit more freedom and going after things that might feel unfamiliar is just knowing that, this life is so short, and I've unfortunately had a lot of loss in my family. And, seeing people whose lives were cut short is just like, I don't want to reach the end of my road, whether it's suddenly or, after 100 and whatever years, and regret that I didn't try something. And so, I take an approach where it's, I think, they call it like a beginner's mind, and just feel like, you know what, like, oh, here's a good example. And I'm actually going to challenge myself to do this soon. I keep saying soon, but it will happen soon. I never learned how to ride a bike as a kid. Full confession. I love spin classes. Like I like kill it on a stationary spin bike. I never learned how to ride a bike because, I fell down a lot when I was learning as a little kid and didn't want to get back on the bike. And my parents were like, fine, if you don't want to ride a bike, you don't have to ride a bike. And many times I've had friends try to, help me learn how to ride, and it's failed. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I know I'm going to get back on a bike soon. And when I do, it'll be awesome. And it'll be one of those like life, like milestone achievements for me, which is something silly. And that, I'm 37 years old and people learn when they're like 5, but it's like I can approach that now without a sense of shame or sadness or frustration or that wound of, oh, well, my parents didn't care enough about me to make me do it. It'll just be something fun to do. And as I mentioned before, like if fun is kind of the focus and center of my life these days because life is too short. And, every day for me has to, even in the darkest and most challenging and chaotic of times, like I'll still be dancing, I'll still be celebrating, I'll still be finding a way to bring fun into life.
It's just crazy to think that
Mhm.
like we're so shaped by those small amount of years, and it's such a small percentage of our life.
It's wild. Yes. I mean, when I look at a lot of adults who are, have crazy things happen. We see that person driving down the road, flicking a random person off, or, you see all these people who are aggressive or toxic, we might term them, or have all these kind of maladaptive behaviors. I look at that now and I say, like, oh, well, there's, a poor, sad child and that person who felt like, they had to have this loud, wild, crazy outburst to get attention.
Mhm.
And so, we come into this world a clean slate, like open slate, and that's like the most beautiful thing. But it's also kind of like, ooh, like it's very sobering
Yeah.
because, everything that we're putting on that plate is going to stick. It's it's gonna be there. And
Yeah.
so we have like the first however many years, 10, 15 years where we're loading up the plate, we're loading up the plate. And then it's like, okay, well, are we gonna continue? Are we gonna try to eat all of this food? Or are we going to take some of these pieces off that we know are not going to serve us? And I feel like, that's where a lot of we hear the term reparenting. That's been a big part of my healing journey and looking at the areas where, God bless parents, but they have their own childhood wounds that they did not resolve, and those showed up in their relationship, and they showed up in their ways of parenting, and they did the best that they could with the tools that they had and the knowledge. But as we mature and see how we need to navigate this world and feel seen and heard and loved, we start to see those deficits. And so the reparenting process for me started maybe 6, 7 years ago, and I met, one of my great mentors who, she's a former psychotherapist, and so she had all of those tools, and she wasn't psychoanalyzing me or anything in our mentorship process, but the way that she would hold the mirror up for me, and, she brought to light so many times, like, "Wow, you are so hard on yourself. Like, where is that coming from?" Well, obviously, I was in a sport where you're being criticized for every single thing that you're doing, and had a very hypercritical mother who loved me dearly, but she also was very critical of herself. That's how she knew how to be. That's how she showed love, was by, keeping you on that straight and narrow. And so the reparenting process for me, and this is where the fun keeps coming in, it's, being able to have a sense of levity and lightness, and knowing that it's like, if I mess it up, it's not the end of the world. I'm not going to die. Like, I think oftentimes our, nervous system, when we have childhood trauma, it's like we're thinking, oh my gosh, like if I mess this up, I'm going to die. Like, we're not necessarily saying I'm going to die, but that's what our nervous system is feeling when we're anxious and, gritting down and feeling all sorts of things. It's like, well, no, it's sensing danger, it's feeling unsafe, because there was a point in time where we questioned as children whether we would be safe if we didn't make all A's on our report card. That was one thing for me. It was like, if I had an A and not an A plus, oh my gosh. And so, reparenting for me has been just like showing myself grace and knowing that I will always give myself a second chance, and knowing that like I am loved no matter what. Even if no one else in the world loves me, like I will love myself unconditionally. And a whole lot of people love me because I'm very blessed. So
I think it's so hard to find that balance between like when you are trying to, whether it's reparenting or because that's something new. I've never actually heard of that before, but it sounds pretty interesting. Or whatever kind of self-realization maybe that you're having of, hey, I need to do something. I need to fix or reshape or whatever you want to call it or whatever you want to do. I think it's hard to or it would be hard, I guess, to go from like, this is who I am, to now I'm like implementing these new ideas and these new like norms and like when you have like thought patterns, like I think it's so hard to, like, you rationalize those as, oh, that's just the way that it is, that's the way that it should be. I think
Mhm.
that's even the harder part, is like, this is the way that it should be because this is what I believe, and like this is the way that it, like, everybody should think because this is, the way that I grew up and, you know my life experience. And then like you go in and like you maybe insert these new things that you maybe aren't totally on board with or like actually believe yet. Is that like is a struggle, is like trying to like self-convince that like, okay, I know that this is going to be a positive thing, but for now it's like I'm fighting myself.
Are you a personal trainer who wants to scale and grow your business online? Have you been coaching online for years, yet don't know how to incorporate online into your current business model? Introducing Trainer Revenue Multiplier, the premier wealth creation system for fitness professionals that helps you earn more and work less. Visit www.trainerrevenuemultiplier.com today to schedule your free business accelerator session. If you're serious about taking your business to the next level, schedule your call today.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think my process has been one where I I try to recognize when I'm struggling up against myself and pause. So I think a lot of us spend, and I think this is probably what contributes to a lot of anxiety and depression is this struggle against ourselves, whether it's, we're feeling, and I feel like anxiety and depression kind of exist on a spectrum. They're kind of the same process, but one might be more focused towards worry in the future and one more focused on the past and being pulled back in that direction, but the same processes of not feeling good enough and not feeling worthy to have or do or be what it is that we seek. And so I'll give you an example from my teaching. So I have a coaching program called Burnazons, and one of my core methodologies I call the ABS method. And that stands for awareness. And so that process of recognizing, okay, what am I struggling with here? Like that is the first step of anything, awareness. Awareness is the first step to healing. Like awareness is the first step to transformation and, shifting into whatever that next thing is. We have to know what it is that we need and where we are in the moment. And so to give an example of how I would use that, shifting a thought pattern, and one that I'm currently working with for myself is my mindset around money. I think a lot of us have, that changing the mindset around money to think of it more as energy, and energy is constantly flowing. And so I am very much aware of my patterns of wanting to spend when I'm emotional. Like I love hopping on Amazon or whatever, be like, oh, that's cute. I can just add that to my order with the laundry detergent and everything else. And the husband doesn't have to know that I've been doing a little extra shopping. So I'm very aware of my patterns. And so it's like, but our goal for this year is greater financial prosperity. So it's like I don't want to keep running up against myself when the goal of paying off my student loans, moving into a house and not sharing an apartment with college students who let their dogs poop in the hall. Like I'm aligning all these different things so that I can have what I want. And there are still patterns that I'm working through, but that awareness keeps me focused on, oh, there it is again. And not beating myself up for it, not shaming or guilting myself. It's simply like, oh, versus, why did I do that? Like, I still buy a splurge here or there, but we're not doing it as often. So awareness is the first step. Beliefs is the first B of the ABS method. So like I fully believe that I can earn as much money as I desire, that I have the capacity to save, that as much abundance that flows to me is like I can have all the things that I want. Like that is a core belief that I have now. But I used to believe that, well, I can only make a certain amount of money if I have X amount of clients. Well, sure. And I can also receive money in all sorts of different ways that I didn't expect. Tax refund, gifts, didn't check at like my Amazon affiliate, whatever, like money. Like there's all sorts of ways that money can come to me. So rewriting those beliefs is a key part. The second B is boundaries. So mental boundaries that I'm having with myself is, being able to recognize when I'm starting to fall back into those old patterns and saying like, okay, like when I do that, I will not fall more into the spiral of like, well, screw it. I bought that one thing. Now I'm just going to keep shopping for more. It's like, no, like we set boundaries. Yes, we're going to mess up, but that's okay. We're going to have, loving boundaries with ourselves so that we can support ourselves. It's not something that's being restrictive, it's something that's ultimately expansive. Now, the third B, and abs has three B's in Riva's world. The third B is basics, and that stands for basic needs. So, like, obviously, we all have basic needs like food, shelter, security, and I include love to be one of those basic needs that we all have. And so, with the same example, like a basic need for me is to have a compassionate stance, a loving stance towards myself and money instead of feeling like, oh, well, if I don't pay my loans off within this certain amount of time, then I'm a failure because all my other med school classmates, they're living in houses and living large and doing all of the things. Like, no, like I still can have all of my own love, all of the love that I need, even if I am not on that same path with other people. And that's so important is I feel like a lot of us, especially with the money thing, are comparing ourselves to people in completely different situations. And so that basic need of love for me in this example is one that has grounded me a lot as I think since okay, I'm going to rewind a little bit. I'm a residency dropout, and that was one thing that really affected my belief in myself as a doctor, was I was like, this path isn't for me. Like I went through all of med school and knew all along that I didn't really want to practice conventional medicine, but I didn't know what other paths were available to me. And honestly, I was too afraid to explore what other paths were available because then there's no perfect charted path for me to follow. I'd be making it up myself. And so yeah, once I reached that point where I was like, this staying on this path is literally making me feel crazy. I'm feeling suicidal. I'm literally wanting to like let oncoming traffic hit me as I'm driving to work. Like it was that moment where it's my wake up calls, like my life was worth so much more than this. And so then my entrepreneurial journey started a couple of years later, and I think alongside with that, so did a lot of the money stories. And so it's like, oh, well, it's all on me now to make my own money and survive. And I never went to business school, so I don't have all the tools to do this right. And like all this other stories and beliefs started to come in. And so um, that's perfect segue into the S of the abs method, shifting. So, what are those new beliefs that I'm shifting into here? And that is that, like I mentioned before, it's like I have the ability to earn as much money as I want and need. And no matter what I do, whether I have $0 in the bank or a million, I will be fully supported by the people that I love, and I will still have a beautiful life. So, ABS method, awareness, boundaries, basics, beliefs, and shifting, all of those are the way that I've been able to take those thought patterns, the things that really formed the core of my being and my identity, and allowed me over a process. It's not an overnight thing. I'm still figuring it all out, but we do have the power to transform those thought patterns that have become so much of a part of ourselves.
Was becoming a doctor, was that like did it feel like that was the plan from like day one?
Very much so. Yeah. So it's funny because I actually, hold on a second, I can grab it off the shelf here. I have this little my shelf above my desk with all my bodybuilding trophies and different mementos. But I don't know how many people out there had this Fisher Price medical kit. But when I was like 2 or 3 years old, I got this for Christmas, and bam, doctor. So literally, this is, gosh, this is like 35-year-old little toy set here. And I keep to remind myself, it's like one, play. So it was fun playing doctor as a little kid. And it's always fun too to be like, I'm going to be a doctor like mommy and daddy, and like
Mhm.
seeing all the support and love and praise. Like, yeah, she's going to be a doctor just like us. But for me, it was more of like I was saying it, and because it was just something that, I think a lot of kids say they want to do what their parents do. And especially when it's like a doctor or something fancy like that. And so it wasn't until I was maybe around like 14 or 15 when I started doing the extracurriculars and things in school for that medical path, and started volunteering in hospitals and seeing like, ooh, this doesn't really represent health so much. There's, and my parents make fun of me. They're like, oh, well, what kind of doctor doesn't like sick people? I'm like, it's not that I don't like sick people. It's that, I'm a very energetically sensitive person. So like when I'm around a lot of sickness and a lot of sadness, like like I really feel that in my body. And so like I just never felt good when I'd be in all of these settings. And I was just like, I don't want to my whole work and life and everything to be in a setting where I don't feel good. Even if I can do all of these great things for people, like I need to feel good too if I'm showing up for work. But, I think when we're still in high school, it's like, well, my parents, they know what's best for me. So I'm just going to keep going down this path. And I was applying to college. So I applied to Rice University, which had a medical scholars program with Baylor College of Medicine. And my bargain with God was, okay, if I get into this medical scholars program, then I'm meant to be a doctor. And dang it, I got in. So, so be careful when you bargain with God, because you might get what you don't want. I mean, and what a blessing. I mean, there were thousands of people who apply and they accept like 10 or 15 every year. And I had a seat in medical school when I was 17 years old, like secured. All I had to do was maintain a certain GPA at Rice, like a 3.0 overall, which was very doable. And I did it. But going through high school is like everything I did, and as far as related to medical stuff, I was like, I'm going through the motions, in college, like the classes, all for my medical prerequisites, I hated. But then at that same point in time, I did fall in love with the human body in a way that I hadn't anticipated. I mean, it makes complete sense. Like I ended up in the kinesiology track and loved understanding how to take this vessel that we all live in and let it do what it was made to do. It was made to move. We are made to like do all sorts of incredible things with our bodies. And for once, I finally felt inspired and empowered by what I was learning. As I also had issues with an eating disorder that I didn't even realize I had an eating disorder at this point in time, because it was very much a normalized thing of our family culture. So, dieting was just what everybody did. But um I I reached a point where, it's like I was crash dieting and doing like the lemonade cleanse and like only drinking lemonade with maple syrup and cayenne for several days before my parents would visit, because I didn't want to feel shamed for having gained weight. And then finally, when I got to taking nutrition in college, that was a big wake up call for me when I learned, whoa, like food is actually not the enemy. It's like I can learn how to work with food in a way to support my body, to have plenty of energy, and utilize all the tools that I'm learning in physiology and, exercise science and everything that I was doing to learn how to perform better, to have, better, yeah, to just create physique that I was yearning to create by restricting food. And it just felt like a new part of me had awakened. to know that it's like I had all of this power within me all the time, and the sky was a limit. And so that really began my journey of really taking the things that I was learning and applying them specifically to my own passions. And I very much have used a lot of my experience with biomechanics and exercise physiology on my bodybuilding path to, like, when I'm in the gym and recording myself and looking at my movements and tweaking things, like, it's all my kinesiology study coming back to support me. So it's been fun.
There's such a big difference between short-term gratification and being happy.
The generations above us, I think, had very much a, you're gonna suffer, it's you just keep going. Like with my parents are like, well, we had to be on call for 5,000 hours straight. Why are you complaining about 24 hours? Well, obviously it wasn't 5,000 hours, but that sense of like, well, we had to suffer so much, now it's your turn to suffer. Well, haven't we all suffered enough collectively? Like, why should the next generation have to continue suffering as much? Like, I think there should be less suffering for the people coming up, because we've learned how to make things more efficient. We're here to pass on a better life to the people coming after us. So the idea, and I think this is quite prevalent in the medical world, I think in the sports world too, like, that it's like the grit and hustle and grind. Yes, it's going to be there, but if it's so prominent that you're waking up in the morning and then the second your eyes peel open, you're feeling that sense of heaviness of like, okay, we have to do this again. Like a lot of competitors when they're in prep, it's like if you're waking up in prep and you're like, oh, I have to go do cardio, or I have to do this or that, and you're not excited about it, of course, there's going to be days where you're not excited. Like, that's just part of the game. But if the majority of your existence is in a state of dread and like fear and anxiety and worry around something that you said you wanted at one point in time, then maybe you don't want it right now. And that's okay. And I think we get to give ourselves more permission to change our minds. What you wanted a year ago, like what I wanted, when I started competing, is not the same as what I want now. It's like I've been through hell and back with my health, to the point that it's like, okay, I don't want to be so lean to the point that my body can't produce, uh, all the hormones that it needs to produce. Like, I don't want to. And I think that's a real thing for us women in the sport. It's like the standards that we're required to adhere to do not necessarily coincide with fertility or good emotional mental health and all these things. It's like, but we do it because we love the sport. And so I think it's important to recognize, like, what you want and your goals and everything you're working towards, that gets to be fluid. It gets to be something that will evolve with you, because we're constantly evolving creatures. And so when it comes to the world of bodybuilding, my hope is for, and obviously since I work with women, my hope is for more women to be able to, have a sense of, what is it that I want for myself now, but also beyond this sport, beyond this show, beyond all of that? Are the actions that I'm taking now moving me closer towards that or further away? And I think that can then help us with the sense of the delayed gratification, the sense of, okay, well, I'm gritting and hustling now, but what is it all for? It's like a very important reckoning that I've had to make is, it's like I'm 37 years old and I haven't had any kids yet. And so and having experienced adrenal fatigue and global hormone failure, where, my testosterone and estrogen, like all of my sex hormones were completely depleted, not even like detectable amounts of testosterone in my system back in 2022 when I hit and crashed and burned the hardest that I ever have. My goal at that time was, obviously we're all working towards that pro card. But now it's like my goal is to be able to compete and feel good. And when I step off the stage, be able to re-enter life and continue to feel good and to continue to be on that path where my body will be able to have kids at some point. But I know that if my goal is simply to get as lean as possible to get my pro card and do all the things, like there's a good chance that my body will not have the right hormonal balance to be able to have kids. So I've adjusted. And there is a little bit, I think, of grief associated with that. And it's like I had this goal and I wanted to do it this way. And I've kind of let that go. And I'm in the process of just making peace with it. But it ultimately feels good to know that I can do like I can literally do anything. If I wanted to be a professional skydiver, I could do that too. Like there's so many things out there in the world. The sport isn't the end all be all. It's something that I love. It's been transformative and the people that it's brought into my world and the things I've been able to do. But I know that I will always have an amazing life as long as I'm putting my health first and my family and my future, keeping that in my present mind.
Mhm. When it comes to the sport of bodybuilding, and not just that, but really anything that skydiving, professional skydiver, whatever it may be, um, for you, is it something that where you like?
This podcast is sponsored by Smoking Gun Coffee, a veteran-owned coffee company that strives to give back to those in need. Don't forget to use code TWR10 for a 10% discount at checkout.
You're like taking that time to like consciously think, like consciously maybe reevaluate and think, okay, is this still something? Or is it more along the lines of like when you feel a certain way, you start to reevaluate that?
Yeah, I'm very much a feeling person for sure. So, to give you an example, the back in 2023, I competed at the Amateur Olympia. And that was my first show back after having burnt out really badly the previous year. And I wasn't expecting to compete. It was one of my best friends is Jessica Wilson, who is the Masters Bikini Olympia champion, the inaugural Bikini Olympia and Masters Bikini Olympia, and witnessing her win and obviously being a part of her journey all these years and getting there woke up something inside of me that I had put to sleep. Is when, the hormones collapsed, everything, like my life was not so great. Like to go from, competing and your day to day is like centered around the sport to now my day to day revolved around simply just like resting and, going out for a walk and like gentle exercise, which gentle is not a word that was in my vocabulary until I burned out and was like, holy crap, like my body didn't have the capacity to work out the way that it did. And so a year and a half, or actually it was 19 months between that 2022 show in March of 2022, after which I burnt out pretty badly, to being on stage October 31st, 2023. And so seeing Jess compete at the Masters Olympia in August of 23 woke up that feeling within me again. It was a fire that I felt many times, is that fire that gets me back into prep. I'm like, okay, we're going to do it. But it caught me off guard because the story, the beliefs, my head, and of course, being a medical doctor and a patient, I'm being extra cautious and like looking I think almost hypercritically at myself of like, oh, well, I'm not ready yet. Like, I can't compete. I'm going to burn out. I'm going to mess up everything that I've done. All this healing work will be lost and I'll be back at where I started again. But there was this feeling of, well, you get to do things a different way. You can still compete and you can still go to, the amateur Olympia where everybody is going to be on point, and maybe you won't be as on point as you normally would be, but it's okay. Like, you love the sport, you love competing, you love being in this environment, you love being surrounded by your gym family. Like, just go for it. And so I went into the most intentional prep I've ever done. It was only 8 weeks. And most people were like, what? It would go from like, and when I started out, I was only really training maybe 2 or 3 times a week to then going into prep. So kind of crazy, but that's just me. Um, but it was a totally different experience for me. It's like every day, I woke up excited and grateful that I was going to be back on stage again. Yes, it was extremely challenging because I had to put in like, it wasn't that I was putting in more work that I had ever done, but when you're being ultra intentional with every rep that you're doing to make every rep count 1000%, because you're not going, because I was determined, like, I'm not going to burn out again. So I'm not going to be in the gym for 2, 3 hours total a day trying to do all the things and all the cardio and all the just excessive work. Like, I'm going to do as much as I feel my body can handle. And it was a lot less than what I would normally do, but I still ended up on stage in amazing shape, feeling great. And the most important thing was I felt present. I think a lot of us on show day are kind of swept up into all the fanfare and everything going on, and are getting, a little sour because we're backstage waiting and then line us up and they're like, oh, we're gonna go on. Oh, wait, no, we're taking a break. Sorry, wait again. Like, that whole experience, I was just like, I don't care. I could be waiting all day and like make me wait longer. And it's like, I get to be here and soak up every bit of this experience that I thought I would never have again. And so, yeah, like that feeling was something that drove me every single day. It was, hearing Jess's words when she won the Masters Olympia title was, it's never too late. And, that was kind of like my mantra is like, it's never too late. It's only an 8-week prep, but I have enough time. I'm not too old. I'm not too burnt out. I'm not too whatever. Like, I have everything that I need to be successful. And that's also been a big part of the journey, is redefining success. Success isn't getting the IFBB Pro cards. Success is showing up and knowing that you are worthy. I'm worthy of being a pro. That just hasn't manifested yet. And I get to continue competing if I want to, or not, or whatever. Like, I'm still going to be a part of the sport in some capacity. I know that. And it brings me joy to be able to support other people and showing up in a way where their health remains front and center. And that was a really cool experience from the Olympia last year. It's like, I had a lot of fun competing, but I had even more fun getting to be, Jess Wilson. She was at the Olympia again this past year. And so, like, I got to be her hype woman. Like, I got to be there, with her at the athlete meet and greet and record her in her element, talking to all the other masters women who was so inspired by her. It was one of those experiences that was so eye-opening for me because, it can be a very self-centered sport. Obviously, it's like we have to be the center of our own lives to do all the things. But for me, I saw it's like, yes, like I can do this for me, and I get to do this with the people that I love and to help them shine even more. And that brings me even more joy than just doing it for my own glory. As humans, we all seek connection, right? And it's like we have this beautiful world, this beautiful industry where, regardless of where you are on your fitness journey, you belong. And being able to see, the people that we admire on social media and then to see them in the flesh, it's like, getting to meet your real world superheroes. It's like if I could meet Storm from X-Men, like that would just like, I'd just be dead. But instead, it's like, to go back to Jess, it's like Jess started out just somebody I followed on Instagram and it was like fangirling when we ended up at a show together. And I turn around and we're standing naked waiting for our man. And I turn around, I see, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Jess. It's like, don't be awkward. Don't be that awkward person. But, it's like from then, it was like, then we started talking. We're like, oh my gosh, I follow you on Instagram. Like, oh my gosh. And then we saw how much of our stories were parallel. And she's a vet med. I'm a people med. So it's like we both had med paths that we took very divergent paths, and building was a way for us to, come back to ourselves. And we had just seen all of these ways where we had been able to expand through this experience as a bodybuilder that our careers didn't offer us. And so, the sport, I'm sure so many of the listeners out there will also have similar stories of how they, met their bestie from Instagram and real life and the magical moments whenever we finally get to connect in person, because it's been incredible. I feel like some of my closest friends in the world now are people that I've met through Instagram, through the bodybuilding world.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Yeah, there's so many people out there that maybe I'll never meet them. Maybe I'll meet them at a show one day or whatever. But like, it's cool the support that is out there, and um, just a connection and a community. You mentioned it. It's just like I think it came for me too. It's just such like a unique time when people weren't as able to be in person. And so like having a podcast was like such a great way to have that. So it was just a really kind of cool, perfect storm, if you will, of all the factors coming together. But very blessed to have this podcast and thankful for you to come on and for all the guests to come on and share their journey and share. And I'd love to actually have you back on. We didn't even dive that deep into some stuff that I wanted to talk about, but a great
I
conversation.
can talk. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Dan. I would be honored to come back on. And yeah, maybe it was funny. It didn't occur to me till today. I was like, maybe I should have him send me the questions so that I can like steer, because once I start talking, and then I don't even know where this mouth is taking me. So if you want to give me the heads up on what I should keep my mind geared to next time, so we get all your questions covered. But I mean, I know that anytime I have a platform, whatever comes out is what the people need to hear. So I trust that, the message that I've shared and what we've connected on today will reach people's hearts and minds in a unique way. And, I'm so grateful for you just opening up to me the space. Like we never even got to, have a conversation or like, chat beforehand. And this is, it's a really beautiful thing that you've created here. And I look forward to, getting to share more.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, and I like to keep it that way. Like to keep it conversational, and some people, they're like, "Oh, can you send me questions? I'm getting nervous, or I'm nervous about it, or whatever." But I prefer the conversational style because, like you said, like whatever we talk about is we're talking about it for some reason. Like I feel like that there's some reason that I have a question that pops into my head, or you have a topic that maybe you've been thinking about that you feel like you need to talk about. So that's the way that I like to do it. And, I love having people back on multiple times to dig deeper into their, experience and stuff like that. So yeah, like I said, we'll definitely have to schedule up another one. It was really fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And I'm glad you had fun, as I had a great time too. So fun is where it's at.
Before we head out, if you want to share your social media or website or anything like that, you can.
Sure. So my social, you can find me on Instagram at gimmesomecoco. It's GIMMESOMECOCO. And my email or my website is rivawellness.com. So Riva is spelled RIV as in Victor A, wellness.com. And yeah, those are the two main places to find me. Hit me up in the DMs and let me know what you loved best about the podcast today.
If you're tired of searching for a coach or trainer, somebody who knows what they're talking about and has experience, make sure you go check out the new Coach's Corner on weightroompodcast.com. You can find quality, qualified coaches to help you achieve your goals, whether that's in bodybuilding or just general fitness. Stop wasting time and start achieving your goals today. The link to the Coach's Corner is down in the description below.